You've got a great idea for a screenplay, but then you Google how to structure a script, and suddenly you're drowning in frameworks. Save the Cat, The Hero's Journey, The Anatomy of Story, The Sequence Approach, and they're all just 3 acts filled with a number of steps or beats. So which one do you choose for your story? Well, I tried all 4, so you don't have to. And if you stick around to the end, I think my recommendation might surprise you. As a quick refresher, the 3-act structure splits a story into 3 sections, vaguely described as the setup, rising action, and resolution. But there's no strict definition of an act, so the transition between them is a bit dependent on perspective. Still, it's a good framework that gives us a common story language and sets general expectations for what happens when within a narrative. In fact, we've spent over a century trying to resolve that what-when question and discover a universal set of story beats or steps. But don't hold your breath. If such a blueprint existed, then either stories would be overly rote and predictable,
Same, but different. But still same.
or the steps would be so broad they'd become practically useless.
Could the freak be any more vague?
But if you stop trying to claim that your way is the only way, the possibilities really start to open up. It's a bit of a square rectangle situation, where it might be true that following a prescribed set of beats can produce a great story, even if that doesn't mean every great story must follow those same beats. In fact, one of the biggest differences between these 4 books is their flexibility, with Save the Cat being the most formulaic to the point it includes page counts. The Hero's Journey being similarly prescriptive, but more flexible with order, length, and placement. The Anatomy of Story being adaptable in both the number and choice of beats and their placement. And the Sequence Approach being the most flexible, with much more of a focus on how we should conceive of beats in a story, rather than what exactly needs to be in them. But it's still worth comparing these structures beat by beat. All 4 books agree, stories start with a setup that introduces the world and the protagonist. Everyone but the Sequence Approach directly mentions that this includes setting up the character's weaknesses or flaws,
How can I know that and not know who I am?
like an identity crisis, along with ghosts from their past or things that are missing in their lives.
I know it's wrong to skip class, but Janice said we were friends, and I was in no position to pass up friends. I guess I'll never.
And Save the Cat and the Hero's Journey suggests this should include setting up the larger context or stakes of the story.
With all we've been through, sometimes I'm amazed we're in as good condition as we are. What with the rebellion and all.
You know of the rebellion against the Empire?
Next comes some sort of inciting incident. This universal moment disrupts the world of the character we just set up, and launches the story toward its main conflict. Katie makes eye contact with Janice and Damien as the plastics confer.
Okay, you should just know that we don't do this a lot, so this is like a really huge deal.
We want to invite you to have lunch with us every day for the rest of the week.
But we still have to get from catalyst to commitment. In both The Hero's Journey and Save the Cat, this requires some form of pushback or debate, where the protagonist wrestles with the changes and initially tries to avoid them.
What do we even talk about?
Hair products.
Ashton Kutcher.
Is that a band?
Would you just do it, please?
Whereas Anatomy of Story and the Sequence Approach focus more on the idea of escalation. In Anatomy, it's an increasing tension around the character's goal. A lack of identity turns into a police confrontation, turns into the realization that you're a trained killer. While the Sequence Approach suggests that a character will always choose the seemingly easiest solution to the conflict first.
I'm gonna see this guy Farquaad right now and get you all off my land and back where you came from.
Only to run into a roadblock that turns them toward the main tension of the story.
All right, Ogre, I'll make you a deal. Go on this quest for me, and I'll give you your swamp back.
For the Sequence Approach, that new tension marks the break into Act 2. And even if the author of Anatomy doesn't technically consider his 22-step outline to follow a 3-act structure, it breaks pretty clearly on a similar revelation that leads to a decision. When our amnesiac hero discovers a trove of conflicting identities, he could leave it all behind, or even turn himself in. Or he could decide to pursue the truth of his identity. But for Save the Cat and the Hero's Journey, the transition into Act 2 hinges more on a movement into a new world.
Mos Eisley Spaceport. You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Whatever the case, breaking into Act 2 means committing to the central conflict. All 4 books begin Act 2 with a repeating cycle, where the hero keeps trying to tackle the conflict, but each attempt ends in some setback. All but the sequence approach explicitly mention the role of allies here. In Save the Cat, the allies and their B stories function to reinforce the themes of the A story, like conforming to expectations versus being yourself.
I'm totally lost. Can you help me?
But I wasn't lost.
Yeah.
I knew exactly what Miss Norbury was talking about.
It's a factorial.
While the allies in the hero's journey and anatomy help the hero learn and grow by challenging their behavior.
How are you gonna make this right? By sending me there alone?
You think I want you to go to the cops? You think that's good for me?
But what the anatomy of story doesn't include that the others do is a midpoint. An event or sequence that marks a major shift in the middle of the story, like Katie becoming a mean girl while trying to take them down, which results in a new complication with raised stakes.
Was I the new Queen Bee?
In the hero's journey and Save the Cat, this latest struggle often results in some form of death-like experience. No! Which is where we reconnect with the anatomy of story. Sort of. See, the anatomy's 22-step outline has most of what we've just discussed in a step called the Gate, Gauntlet, and Visit to Death. But it happens in what I'd consider to be its third act. Though to the author's credit, he's not big on acts and explains that this is the most movable step in the entire structure. So I'm just gonna move it back to better line up with the others. After which all four coalesce with an apparent defeat or low point.
No, that's not what I meant.
This is not gonna stop, Marie. You gotta get out now. Away from me.
Or do they? While Save the Cat and the sequence approach still mention a low point, they're open to the idea that you don't really need one. But Save the Cat gets more specific, claiming this low point can alternatively be a false high. But I found that even the examples given, like Howard Bannister winning the grant he's been after the whole story in What's Up, Doc?
Ah, there they are, our 2 stars. Congratulations, Howard. Thank you, Mr. Lemon.
All still have a low point shortly thereafter, like the mix-up of cases that leads this celebration into chaos.
I can't find my rock.
Let's save the cases.
Which ones?
All of them.
However we arrive here, all four approaches share a similar 2-cycle structure to finish out Act 2. For everyone but the sequence approach, the low point causes some sort of reflection.
Can't believe he's gone.
There wasn't anything you could have done.
Then, continuing conflict leads to a revelation or key item that should help the protagonist overcome the main conflict of the story in the final act.
You must use the information in this R2 unit to help plan the attack. It's our only hope.
Anatomy of Story throws an audience revelation between these moments, creating dramatic irony that ups the tension even further, like showing the bad guys hot on our hero's trail just when they finally think they're safe. But the cycles of the sequence approach differ most here, as it rounds out Act 2 with a simple pair of sequences. If you aren't familiar, a sequence is just a 10 to 15 minute section of the script that functions a lot like a short story with its own setup, tension, rising action, and resolution. The sequences then connect because each resolution is either incomplete or leads to a new tension. Though the final sequence of Act 2 is a bit unique because the book suggests that the original tension of the story should technically be resolved here.
Princess Fiona.
As promised. Now hand it over.
Very well, Ogre. The deed to your swamp. Cleared out.
But this answer to the dramatic question often only offers a glimpse of the true resolution of the story, or even shows its opposite, the consequences of which our hero will have to face in Act 3. If we move the Gate, Gauntlet, and Visit to Death step back to Act 2 for the anatomy of story, then that book and Save the Cat actually share a pretty straightforward version of Act 3. A finale with a final confrontation, where the protagonist overcomes their flaws or weakness.
No, you do remember.
Like finally refusing to let their past control their future.
I don't want to do this anymore.
And displays the lessons they've learned.
When you get bit by a snake, you're supposed to suck the poison out. That's what I had to do. Suck all the poison out of my life.
To impart some change on the world around them.
Why is everybody stressing over this thing? I mean, it's just plastic. It's really just...
Katie snaps it in half with her hand. Gretchen and Damien gasp.
Share it.
The hero's journey adds a beat before all that, called The Road Back, where the hero recommits to the adventure.
Why'd you come with us? Pretty good in a fight. Could use you.
Come on. Why don't you take a look around? You know what's about to happen, what they're up against. You're turning your back on them.
And the goal often shifts and increases in stakes.
The battle station is heavily shielded and carries a firepower greater than half the Starfleet. Its defenses are designed around a direct, large-scale assault. A small one-man fighter should be able to penetrate the outer defense.
This may sound a lot like the end of Act 2 because it basically is for Anatomy and Save the Cat. But this decision often happens in a new story world, and that's what the hero's journey uses to define its break into Act 3. The sequence approach also adds another step before the finale, where the hero has to deal with the unforeseen consequences of resolving the main tension we discussed earlier. Like Shrek grappling with unexpected loneliness after he finally gets the fairy tale creatures removed from his swamp, which leads to the most difficult problem yet.
The wedding! We'll never make it in time!
One that's resolution is often completely opposed to the original tension. Didn't he want everyone out of his swamp? In my opinion, the reversal of the main tension is what gives the sequence approach so much impact. And even if it's nowhere to be seen in the other books, there's nothing to stop you from incorporating it, regardless of which structure you choose to use. But just knowing their similarities and differences isn't enough to help you make that choice. If there's no perfect universal step structure, then how do you evaluate the best approach for your script? The most important differences to inform that decision aren't found in the beats, but in their philosophies. Each author approaches story from a different angle, with their own unique strengths and weaknesses. The hero's journey was born out of comparative literature and developed on the backs of epics and quest narratives. So if you're writing an epic quest, basing the structure on the hero's journey can help build its mythic nature and give it that classical feeling. Save the Cat is much more focused on delivering a set of rules to give your script the best chance of commercial viability. It's prescriptive, broad, and infinitely approachable, which makes it a strong foundation for anyone wanting to write similarly broad stories. It's also great for beginners and early development because it offers more of a guiding hand with nearly page-by-page advice. Anatomy of Story prioritizes character work, emphasizing moral conflict and strong character arcs. So if you're more interested in writing an elevated character drama that leans heavily into theme, then the Anatomy of Story will be a natural fit. Whereas the sequence approach is oriented around pacing and entertainment value, with less time spent on exact beats or character development. That actually makes it quite flexible, which means it could be the best choice for juggling ensembles, or for avant-garde projects, or for when you want to discover the story more through your writing rather than trying to keep strictly to a roadmap. But maybe the most important thing to realize is that if there's no perfect universal structure, then there's no real reason to limit ourselves to a single approach. I've spent a lot of time studying these structures for this series, and trying them out in my own work. Now, none of these approaches will turn you into a good storyteller on their own, but they've all managed to work their way permanently into my workflow, because I've found them each to be the most valuable at different stages of story development. The Anatomy of Story is brilliant for developing your concept and your characters, and I've found myself returning to it as a first step on any new project, even if I don't rely on its 22-step outline. Similarly, I've found the hero's journey to be helpful in developing supporting characters based on or subverting its classic archetypes, rather than by following its exact beats. Save the Cat then takes me from ideas and characters to a full beat sheet as I plan out my story broadly. I don't worry about hitting every beat perfectly, but I do think it does a great job focusing on the turning points of the story, and helps me identify what's missing when my story starts to meander. Finally, the sequence approach has helped me take that beat sheet and break it into a treatment of 8 sequences, to make sure the story has momentum and a good rhythm, while still allowing me a bit more flexibility. Will the story change when I finally start writing the actual pages? Of course, but I found this process lays a strong foundation that ensures there's actually a character and plot worth turning into a story before I have to start considering every word. Though I have to admit that combining these 4 approaches can cause some confusion when it comes to communicating exact act breaks, because they each have their own definition. But is knowing the exact moment we transition between acts really all that important if the overall film still works? I'm not so sure. Which is why in my next video, I'm going to challenge myself and you to rethink acts altogether, to construct a definition that makes them more functional than simple tools of communication, and to explore story structure outside of the 3 acts we've all been told to accept as gospel.